Hi, everyone. I'm Marc Appel and will be your presenter today. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation and to learn more about preclinical biotech investing and also about Orange Grove Bio and our unique investment and development model for preclinical assets. Just to give you a really high-level view of Orange Grove before we dive deeper into the presentation, Orange Grove is a biotech platform company. So we're a holding company with many different subsidiary companies underneath it. And each of our subsidiary companies holds a different proprietary asset that we've sourced from one of the many research universities that we partner with. And we take these different preclinical assets that are each in their own subsidiary company, and our development team, which is managed centrally at Orange Grove Holdings, manages all of these different assets collectively. And the benefits of that are that we have a really high caliber management team working across all these different portfolio companies. And also we're incentivized really to push forward the best technology and quickly, if we see bad data, get rid of any or return any of the technologies that we think are not going to do well in our portfolio. So let's dive in. Here are some important disclaimers regarding Orange Grove and this presentation. So here's a little bit more about Orange Grove before we start talking about preclinical investing. Orange Grove Bio is a platform focused on investments in the oncology and immune disease related spaces. And we're really committed to the idea of reducing the cost of drug development and getting more life-saving therapies from university labs to clinical trials. And unlike a lot of the biotech and venture community, we're not focused on the typical hubs of Boston and San Francisco. Rather, we're partnering up with other research universities across the country that are not being well served by existing investors and drug developers in the earlier stages, and looking at those technologies and figuring out what we can push forward so that more new drugs get to see the light of day. Now, how do we make all of this work? First off, it involves funding really compelling programs, and I'll get into the details of exactly how we source our programs later. But once we find those programs, we invest up to $10 million, and that's really the amount of capital that you need to take these assets from the really earliest stages of development, from lead optimization stage, where you have a molecule that's not quite ready to be the one that's going to be the drug. It needs to be tweaked a bit, and taking that through to early human clinical trials. The second piece is our operational model, which I alluded to earlier, which is the shared platform, the shared group of experts that we're using to manage all the different assets. That gives us the talent so that we're able to advance all of these discoveries, especially because we're working in a lot of ecosystems where there may not be the right caliber of biotech talent to push the technologies forward. And by using a shared team, we're also able to operate at significantly lower costs at the operating level. So it's 50% lower cash costs and 14% lower equity costs than if we were hiring an individual management team at each portfolio company level, which is what's more traditionally seen in biotech and in venture capital. Also, we make extensive use of contract research organizations, and these organizations do all of the wet lab work for us. So they're the ones actually injecting mice for us or actually running tissue assays for us. It's much more cost effective that we direct the work and they execute on it, because that means we don't have to build up all of that infrastructure. So that saves us a lot of money over the course of our portfolio. And finally, we put all this together and we're able to have a very attractive investment portfolio. I'll get into why preclinical is such a great area for investment, particularly in this COVID-related environment where there's a lot more uncertainty. Preclinical has a very high success rate, and that's one of the big allures that I'll get into. And that's really where we're focused. So that means we're going to have a much higher success rate. Also, the fact that we're operating across a broad set of different unrelated assets means there's true investment diversification that you won't typically see in biotech, where most of the platform plays are all interrelated technologies. And finally, as part of this attractive investment opportunity, right now we're setting ourselves at a zero pre-money valuation. And it's really just for a very limited time. My business partner and I have already started putting capital into our programs, and we're letting other investors really get in at the ground level. And we're really only doing that until we start to see some key milestones. After that, we'll obviously have to raise the valuation. And the goals of the business are several-fold. First and foremost is advancing life-saving therapies to help patients. If we're helping patients, we're going to do well on all of our other metrics. We're going to be able to make good money. We're going to be able to be a great partner to everyone else in the ecosystems where we're operating. Our second goal is to be a valuable partner for the research institutions the tech transfer offices of the universities, as well as with the actual academics themselves. And we really value having those close relationships with all of the different key parties in the ecosystems where we operate. And that's really what helps us get some of that unique sourcing capability. And I'll go into that more a little bit later. And you put all that together and we're able to generate, or we expect to be able to generate, very strong returns of 25% plus. Now, this is the drug development process. This lays out everything from discovery, so really the earliest stages of basic drug research, all the way through to phase 3 clinical trials. And in basic research, this is what's being done in an academic lab, where you're identifying an interesting target or an interesting pathway in the body that results in some sort of disease state. You're identifying really early stage molecules that might be targets that might be able to be used against those particular pathways. And the success there is very, very low. So the government puts billions and billions and billions of dollars into that stage of development, as well as many nonprofits do as well. And that's really to get this stuff to a point where it's ready for for-profit institutions to take these things forward for drug development. On the other side of preclinical, you have all the clinical stages, which are phase 1, 2, and 3, which you may have come across in other contexts. 1 is for trials, phase 2 are for dosing trials, and phase 3 are for kind of larger pivotal necessary before you go into and start to sell. We're really focused on the preclinical stage, and the reason we're focused there, 1, there's not too many people playing, and I'll get into why that is the case. And additionally, we're playing there because it has such a high success rate. There aren't binary trials we're running. This is really the stage where you're optimizing the models, getting them ready for testing in people, and then you're running all the kind of necessary testing and manufacturing work that the FDA requires before you can start operating in people, before you can start testing the drug in people. Once you get into phase 1, 2, and 3, you get into much more binary outcomes. You either hit the endpoints or you don't hit the endpoints. And there's obviously a lot more inherent risk in that. And so our model is really to focus on preclinical and to continue to be involved through early clinical, but then to get out. So although if you get involved early, normally people say if you get involved early, you're taking a lot of risk. And that's under the assumption you're going to get in early and you're going to stay the course all the way until you're starting to sell the drug commercially. And what I'm telling you, and really why preclinical investing has become such an appealing area for focus today, and why there's been so much success here, is you can get in early, really have a meaningful impact, take drugs from a point where they're in an academic lab, get them into early human trials, and then exit, because there's a lot of other parties that are very good at these later stages of biotech development, and you can get a very, very good return and have pretty strong success rates. So preclinical has become one of the best opportunities in life sciences today. It's really funding this gap between basic research and the clinical trial stage. And this opportunity has come into being in recent years because large pharma was not very good at it. It required being very nimble and being able to move from opportunity to opportunity as needed. And large pharma was spending a lot of money and having not very good success. And so decided they were going to focus much more on the clinical stages and on the commercial stages of drug development. As they exited, a number of biotech companies and venture firms have entered to fill that gap, but they don't necessarily have the resources to be able to fill all the gap that large pharma had left. And really where Orange Grove is focused is on looking at a lot of those ecosystems where large pharma exited and where there aren't biotech companies and venture firms filling that gap today. Preclinical development has also become a lot less risky than it was historically. There's been a lot of technological advances in recent years that have had a big impact. First off, there are things like high throughput screening and crystalline structure optimization tools that have made it much easier to find the right molecule. So high throughput screens allow you to look through hundreds of thousands of molecules to find the right one very quickly. Crystalline structure optimization has really been pioneered by Schrodinger, which is, I believe, now publicly traded, that allows you to tweak the molecule in certain ways so that you can really get the right molecule using computer programming rather than sort of trying to do so in more manual ways. And this area is going to continue. The technological advances in preclinical development are going to continue to mount in the coming years, particularly as AI starts to become a more and more important factor in drug development. In addition to technological advances, the contract research organizations have really grown in the preclinical space. So whereas before it would be hard to find the right parties to be able to execute on different scopes of work, now the more sophisticated contract research are low cost and then get milestone payment for achieving. So that risk shares the interest ROs with the client, with the case of Orange Grove. Another attractive feature about preclinical development, it requires relatively small amounts of money. So $7 is able to take you from an unoptimized molecule all the way into early clinical development, into a phase 1 trial. I compare that to a phase 2 and 3 trials, we can, combined together, can easily cost in the hundreds of millions of dollars for many drugs. So it's a much more cost-effective area to be focused on. And as mentioned on the previous slide, the success rates here are much higher than in the discovery stage, and also meaningfully higher than the binary outcomes that you see in clinical trials. So the proof really for the success of preclinical investment is really in the numbers, right? And if you look over the past 20 years, I just took 3 funds from the Boston ecosystem as an example: Flagship, Third Rock, and 5AM. And you can see that they went really from almost nothing to being nearly, multi-billions of dollars under management. And just to give you an example, even going into 2020, even in the midst of the COVID crisis, Flagship has raised another $1 billion fund. So it just gives you a sense for how much money has been going in recent years into preclinical. But this is really only a fraction of the opportunity that's out there. And most of these larger funds are focused just on the Boston and San Francisco markets, where there's frankly plenty of innovation to keep them very busy, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of great innovation going on at other academic centers all over the country. And what this means for someone like us is someone like Orange Grove is really able to focus on other markets, right? Not Boston, not San Francisco. And we're also, because of our scale is not that of Flagship or Third Rock, we can look at a lot of more mid-sized opportunities, things that might generate hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, but not multi-billions of dollars of revenue, and still get a very compelling investment and a really attractive return profile. The other aspect of preclinical development isn't just the fact that you're able to have a high degree of success doing it, that there's a lot of potential opportunity out there. It's also that there's a lot of buyers of those assets that you can exit without having to take something yourself through clinical trials. First off, there's the pharma giants of the world. There's around 20 of those guys, and they're big buyers of early clinical stage assets and late preclinical stage assets. A great example is Benavir, which was an oncolytic virus platform acquired by J&J for around $1 billion just around a year or so ago. In addition to that, there's over 120 large US, European, Japanese, and Korean biotech companies, and probably about a similar number of Chinese and Indian biotech companies that are also looking to make those kinds of acquisitions. If you're not taking an asset and selling it to a large biotech or pharma company, there's also opportunities to take those assets public. And there's lots of great banks out there. I listed a few on this page that do that. I mean, just to give you an example, coming from one of the universities we work with, Yale has a company called Arvinas that has spun out from it. It went public at around $600 million of market cap when it was still in a preclinical stage, and now it's actually in the multi-billions of dollars, and it's only in the very earliest of clinical stage. So it can show you how much value can be created even in the preclinical stages of development. And if the public markets aren't right, which maybe if we get into a deeper recession, they won't be, there's also a large number of very prominent life sciences venture capital firms that have lots and lots of dry powder right now and are looking for late preclinical, early clinical stage opportunities. A few of them are listed at the bottom of the page here. The COVID-19 pandemic has really highlighted preclinical biotech. I mean, it's really allowed for a large number of companies to move very quickly into the clinical setting and really gain a lot of prominence very quickly. It's also really highlighted preclinical biotech as an important and attractive area for investors. First off, there's a lot of, as I just alluded to, there's a lot of novel therapies for fighting coronavirus and its symptoms that have emerged from academic labs. Frankly, some of those efforts are ones that we as Orange Grove are involved in as well. And the regulatory landscape has also shifted rapidly, allowing for a lot of innovation to cut through a lot of red tape and get a lot of great preclinical programs very quickly into the clinic, which just enhances the potential return for investors in these preclinical assets. At the same time, it's really proven itself to be a really strong, biotech has proven itself to be a very strong and resilient sector that's attracting a lot of capital. So as stock markets around the world have been impacted by the economic crisis from coronavirus lockdowns, biotech has really been emerging as one of the few outperformers in that economy. And as I alluded to also earlier in this presentation, even in this COVID-19 lockdown environment, biotech venture firms have been raising record amounts of capital. Just two great examples of our Flagship, Pioneering, and Arch Ventures, both of whom raised new funds with north of $1 billion apiece. So hopefully I've given you a sense for why biotech, and particularly early preclinical biotech, has some compelling characteristics to it that investors should find appealing. Let me shift gears now to talk a little bit more about Orange Grove, which is focused on biotech and really preclinical biotech. And talk about some of the unique features of our platform. And one of those is our sourcing capability. So how do we source our preclinical assets? And we get them through these close partnerships with different universities that we work with. And we're really looking for great research institutions that get a lot of government money and that have tech transfer offices that are very excited and eager to work with us, PIs and academics that really want to partner with us and looking for the next great set of technologies. And universities more broadly that really want us to be important parts of their local biotech ecosystems. And just to give you a flavor of that, in some of the universities we work with, we've been launching internship programs. We're also trying to build some of our companies, some of the assets locally as much as possible to the different institutions that we work with. And we try to have an on-the-ground presence at every university that we partner with. And this just gives you a sense for some of the institutions we work with. It's about 20 institutions at this point. Most of them are in the Mid-Atlantic corridor from New Haven to Philly. We've also started to move westward from there. Michigan is a big hub for us, and we're starting to talk to a larger range of institutions around the Midwest for kind of our future areas of growth. And that kind of leads me very naturally into our next slide, where I just show the wide range of potential opportunities of institutions that we could be working with in the future, really both in the Midwest and in the South, where there's just very few biotech companies and very few venture capital firms focusing on in many of these places. And in addition to the universities that we source opportunities from, we also have an important research partnership, development partnership with a large West Coast nonprofit. And that institution both co-invests and co-develops opportunities with us. And that really gives us another source of competitive edge because they have some of the best scientists in the country working there. So now that I've identified a little bit of where our opportunities come from, how do we at a high level think about opportunities? We're really focused mostly on cancer and autoimmune related diseases. Even COVID fits into that because we're mostly focused on the immune related response to COVID and how to treat that. We're not constrained at all by modality. So we look at everything from small molecules to antibodies to gene therapies to cell therapies. And we're able to do that because we have the capabilities in-house in terms of our team and our contract research partners that do a lot of the actual wet lab work for us also have a broad set of capabilities. We're also able to augment any gaps that would come up. We can augment with expert consultants and advisors, and we've done that on some of our programs where we felt there was a real pressing need that we needed to fill. We're also, because we're looking across a large set of different research institutions, we're able to aggregate those best technologies together. So we're able to leverage the best cancer and immune-related programs across all the different universities and put them together to make really exciting combinations. And companies were also able to take different researchers and make introductions and have them work together with us on some of our programs so that we can kind of get the best minds in the business, and regardless of whether they're geographically disparate and may not otherwise be, know to work together. We're also focused where others are not. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean that we're focused geographically at institutions where other investors and biotech companies are not necessarily focused. We're also looking at asset types that they're not as interested in as potential candidates for development. So we're spending a lot of time on small molecules, which have a lot of promise, even in an environment where everybody's really just focused on gene and cell therapy, and there's really a big push on gene and cell therapy right now. We'll also look at a lot of single asset programs rather than big platform plays. Obviously, we like platform plays too, but a lot of other drug developers and drug investors won't focus on single assets. And that's really a shame, because there are some really compelling programs out there that could really treat some diseases in some novel ways that are not being picked up just because of that reason. This just gives you a little bit of a sense for our opportunity. So for our pipeline, rather, we've looked at about 500 or so opportunities and spent a lot of time narrowing that funnel down, discarding a lot of programs either because they were too early and needed more basic research, or because they just weren't the right fit, or because we felt there were some glaring defects in the technology. We're now down to about 15 or 20 programs that we think are pretty interesting. I've listed here kind of 5 of them that are right near the top of our list that we're actively pursuing at this point, or actively developing at this point. The first is a really interesting opportunity in the COVID space, really a chance to target the immune effects of COVID-19 that causes that inflammation in the lungs that results in so many deaths. And we're really hoping that this program can go very quickly into the clinic. And from there, hopefully have a real impact on patients during this epidemic. It also has other indications it can be used for, so we're really hoping to expand it into a broader autoimmune related platform subsequently. Going down the list, many of our other programs that we're spending time on are in the immune or in the cancer related space fields, which fits within our mandate. I'm not going to go too detailed into it. If you really want to dive deeper into our portfolio, I'm happy to do so under the appropriate NDAs and really discuss some of the compelling research that we're taking from the lab to the clinic. In addition to our sourcing capabilities, we also have a really exceptional development capability. This is kind of the other side of the house for us. So first off, we have extremely high quality talent that individual assets would not be able to attract. So by having a large portfolio of programs that we have one development team working on, we're able to really get the best people that wouldn't work on a single early stage program. And those people don't have to have all the right incentives. They don't have to worry about their jobs, because as soon as we see bad data or data that doesn't meet our expectations at any of our portfolio assets, we can return those assets to the university. We don't have to keep pushing them forward. And there's always another wave of potential opportunities for us to spend our time on. Because of the fact that we're constantly getting new data, constantly evaluating if we should keep pushing forward with programs, we're able to get really good decision quality and make decisions as we continue to invest in programs to make sure we're both investing in the right programs and also investing in programs in the right way. So we're really asking the hardest questions first so that we don't run into stumbling blocks later down the line after we've invested millions of dollars into those programs. We also have a very streamlined licensing process. So with all of our university partners, we look to streamline the license as much as possible so that we can very quickly execute a new license and get a new program pushed forward and into our hands and into a development company rather than sitting at the university. And we've heard horror stories of that taking for other people as upwards of a year to get a license in place. We look to do this in a matter of weeks. So this is really a competitive advantage. It's good for the university and it's good for us because it really saves a lot of time, which that time is worth patent life down the road. And finally, by having this shared development team that works across our whole portfolio, we're able to have meaningfully lower team costs, as well as lower equity costs than would otherwise be the case. And by leveraging our contract research partners, we're also able to have meaningfully lower lab costs. We're really getting very exceptional rates as if we had large labs built out, but we're not actually spending the money there. Now, let me talk a little bit about the Orange Grove Executive Board and our senior advisors, because these are some of the pivotal people that allow our business to be successful. Our executive board is really made up of industry leaders who meet as a group on a monthly basis to weigh in on all of our programs and all of the key development decisions that we're doing. But they also interact with us on a daily and at most weekly basis, really to provide real-time guidance as we're working through our programs. And many of these people are folks I've worked with in the past. So Jessica Hopfield and I got to know each other working with Rockefeller on the Robertson Fund, which is a fund that the university has to spin out early stage academic ideas, really what, tied in a little bit with what Orange Grove does essentially, and try to develop those ideas further and get them out of research labs and into sort of the development stage by for-profit institutions. Her background is originally at McKinsey, where she was a partner serving the biotech and pharma world, really with a focus on streamlining R&D. Now she serves on the board of Editas and the board of Radius, which are two very high-profile biotech companies. She's also a trustee of the Joslin Diabetes Center. Then there's Nancy Miller-Rich. Nancy is fantastic. She was the former head of commercialization for Merck's human health business, so she's really one of the industry leaders in drug commercialization. She's on the board today of several biotech companies, including Intercept, which is one of the most prominent companies in the NASH and liver space. And she's been very, very valuable as we've thought about what are the right ways to exit our opportunities. And if we are developing a drug, is there a commercial pathway at the end of the tunnel? Are we investing in programs that are going to have significant commercial opportunities? So she's been a really great thought partner on all of that. Then there's Doug, my co-founder at Orange Grove. Doug has a long track record as one of the leaders of Oak Hill, a mid-market private equity firm where he had an exceptional track record. In more recent years, he's the co-founder of Baragon, which is a $10 billion AUM direct lender. And he played a large role there, really building the infrastructure of that business before it was sold last year. And he and I came together really to solve the problem that many universities were facing of how do we get some of these great technologies out of the lab and into development. And he's really been a great business partner as we built this business up into what it is today. And then finally, Lutz Geibel. And Lutz and I got to know each other really spinning some early stage assets in the oncolytic virus space out of Yale a few years ago. And Lutz is the co-founder and former CEO of Delinea, which was an autoimmune company that he sold to Celgene for nearly $800 million. He was also, for a very long time, the managing partner at SV Life Sciences, which was one of the larger biotech venture firms, which had $1.5 billion in AUM during his time there. So he was involved in many, many early stage preclinical companies and is really a great thought partner on a lot of the deep science that we have to dive into when evaluating programs. In addition to our board, we have a number of senior advisors. There's about 15 or 20 of those folks at this point who weigh in on different programs in different capacities. They're not as holistically involved across the whole portfolio, though actually, frankly, a couple of them have become so. And they're really critical to our success as a business because we don't have all the capabilities in-house, and so we really need to have them through this kind of web of experts and advisors. I'll just highlight two of them that are particularly involved across our business. One is Vijay Bhargava. Vijay was one of the R&D leaders at Novartis, really was involved in many of their leading programs, has a lot of expertise in things like toxicology, which is really important for evaluating early stage drug programs. He also has helped a number of large venture firms building out their early stage capabilities in the biotech space. So he's really had experience doing what we're trying to do before, and so he's bringing a lot of that to bear. Additionally, then there's, I want to highlight also Greg Licolai. Greg is a good friend, also heavily, as I am, heavily involved with Yale. He serves as a professor there, and in one of his hats, he's also the Chief Medical Information Officer at PRA, one of the largest clinical stage contract research organizations in the country. And he's been very valuable thinking through the clinical development of our programs. So what is that phase 1 and phase 2 going to look like if this preclinical development plan is successful, and how much is that going to cost? And are we the right party to be leading that? Should we be bringing in other investors? Should we be selling it to large pharma before we ever get to that point? So he's really the key thought partner in a lot of our clinical strategy. In addition to our advisors and our board, we also have our core team, right? So there's myself. I'm the co-founder of Orange Grove. Prior to this, I was running the public markets healthcare book at Marathon, a large investment firm located in New York. I also helped to build out their structured healthcare investment portfolio, which was really focused on royalty investing in biotech, as well as lending money to different biotech companies to help them fund their later stage clinical trials and their commercialization efforts. In addition to those roles, for a number of years, I've been an entrepreneur in residence with Yale, where I've really helped the university spin out early stage biotech companies and advise academics on how to do that. I'm also an advisor to Weill Cornell's eLab, where I serve a similar role, and the Rockefeller Robertson Fund. In addition to myself, 2 folks we've identified that are going to be joining our team shortly. They're coming out of biotech venture capital, really this very early stage venture capital, where you're both doing some sourcing elements to the job, but you're also helping to build the companies from scratch. So it's really that kind of hybrid role, and that's really what we value, because we're both drug sourcers but also drug developers, and you really need to bring both of those skills together in order to be successful when building a business like Orange Grove. In addition to those folks, and fitting with that theme, is John Freshley. John he's been the CEO of multiple early stage biotech companies. He's based out in the Michigan ecosystem, so he knows everybody there from tech transfer. He knows all of the from all the major universities. He knows all of the key academics, and he's really a great thought partner as we look at sourcing opportunities in Michigan and trying to get more of those through to the clinic. On our development side, so these are the guys that are really getting into the weeds, putting together the development plans for the different assets that we license. We have a number of really skilled senior leaders there. First, there's Bill Miller, who heads up our chemistry effort. So he has about 30 years of experience at GSK, really working across lots of different programs in chemistry, including a lot in oncology and in inflammation, which is very relevant to our business. And remember, medicinal chemistry is so important in preclinical development because we have so many programs we look at where we need to figure out, how do we optimize this molecule? How do we get this molecule from some sort of a tool compound that an academic was using to something that's actually usable as a drug that we can patent and we can take into clinical trials? And that's really where Bill is so vital to a lot of our efforts. He's also great in that he can translate very complicated science into much more basic things that everyday folks, or even frankly just even the biologists, can understand, because chemistry can be such a unique and specific field. Then there's Ken Olivier, who runs our toxicology effort. He has nearly 20 years of experience really across a wide range of biotech companies. He's been at companies including Merrimack, Morphic, Torque, as well as some of the kind of large staples like Biogen and GSK. And he's led multiple programs through IND over his career. Toxicology is just such an important part of our business, because if the drug, there's a lot of times where, especially in cancer drugs, where the drug works and cures the cancer, but it kills the patient. And Ken's role has been so vital in making sure that we're designing drugs that are going to help patients and the benefits are going to outweigh the risks. So that's something that the FDA is very, very keen on. They really don't want you taking non-safe drugs into patients. And finally, there's Ryan Fox. Ryan is another critical member of our team. He and Bill have worked together for many years at GSK. Ryan has a chemistry background, but spent most of his career doing broader R&D and operations for preclinical programs. And he's extremely critical member as we build out all of the operating plans for all of our programs. So he plays a really key role in putting together those operating plans. So at a very high level, the market opportunity of preclinical biotech combined with the really efficient structure that we've thought up at Orange Grove, this kind of holding company structure with one management team working across a whole portfolio of subsidiary companies, really allows for these very compelling economics. And our model is able to really drive alpha in a way that way well beyond what traditional biotech venture capital is able to do. And you can see here our MOIC is significantly higher than traditional venture, and the IRR that we're able to generate is significantly higher. And it really comes from the fact that we're not generating fees at two levels, right? We're having one management team working across the portfolio that we're incentivizing, and one sourcing team all working together. You're not paying for management at one level and then for a fund at a second level, and that's really, you know, putting aside even all the capabilities we've built, that in and of itself generates outsized return for our investors. We've also tried to structure this in ways to limit downside. So I hope that I was able to convince you today that preclinical is not necessarily any riskier than other stages of drug development. It's all a matter of getting in early and getting out early. And preclinical has a north of a 70% success rate, which should make it a particularly attractive area for investment. But additionally, we've also really structured a very diversified portfolio of assets where we're not putting all of our capital into one program or one platform, where if one thing fails, it's going to potentially cascade and have an impact on all of our other programs. Everything is very siloed and differentiated and separate. And so each individual asset has a different shot on goal, and that diversification really will allow us to generate outsized returns over time. And finally, we're also working with some of the top scientists and some of the best universities in the world that are just being underserved today by the biotech and venture capital community. And that's really where part of our edge comes from. It's really these great relationships that allows us to have unique sourcing. And finally, our structure is set up to be extremely tax efficient. There's a reason we're using this holding company and subsidiary company approach. The qualified small business capital gains exemption should allow us to effectively not pay capital gains on quite a bit of the programs that we develop. Additionally, there's a lot of R&D tax credits and state incentives that also should help in really making this a very tax advantaged way to invest. Now, this shows you the high level growth plan for Orange Grove over time. So we're starting out asking for $25 million today. A good chunk of this is already accounted for between our team and some strategic investors that are participating in this early round. But then we're very rapidly on the back of this going to be raising much larger sums of capital. And this is very similar. Our growth plan here is very similar to a company called Bridge Bio. So just to give you the backstory here, Bridge Bio is a rare disease platform company, also with a lot of common management that's used across the portfolio of assets that they manage. And they started out with also raising money from family offices, from smaller institutional investors, really building out their pipeline. And then they went, as we've already started to have conversations with some of these larger investors like the KKRs and CPPIBs of the world, and we're able to raise very, very large amounts of money, do that over a series of a couple of rounds, and then go public. And so we've designed a very similar strategy here, where we're going to start out with a smaller amount of capital, really vet and develop some of the early portfolio, and then start raising very large institutional rounds to get us to a successful IPO. So here's just the quick term sheet so everyone can see it. We're starting at a zero pre-money value. That's a very limited time offer opportunity, because we're already starting to deploy capital against our assets. And as we do that and hit inflection points, we're not going to be able to keep offering that. 25% management option pool is being put in place. That's the way in which, because we're doing a zero pre-money, we're not incentivizing the team with equity from the get-go, but we're incentivizing them through the management option pool. And as I said, this is a much more efficient and investor-friendly manner than having a venture firm with a 2 and 20 structure and then incentivizing management at the operating companies additionally. We're also, it's a single class structure, just-in-time capital structure, where we'll call the capital over a several-year period when we'll be investing it. All of our investors will have pro rata participation rights in any follow-on raises. And large investors may be entitled to some additional governance rights. And finally, probably one of the biggest appeals of Orange Grove is we're going to be building a lot of clinical stage biotech companies, right? And we're giving our investors the right to participate in the funding of those additional spinouts and subsidiaries that we're going to build, so that they're going to have first rights to make those, to be investors in those spinout companies. And that's really a unique opportunity for folks really looking to grow their biotech portfolio, to have a a firm place within the preclinical world, right, and a really great management team over a course of a whole diversified portfolio, and then get sort of cherry picking rights in some great clinical stage programs too. So that takes me to the end of the presentation. There's obviously a lot more I could talk to you about Orange Grove and about preclinical biotech investing. Would love to set up time to continue the conversation. So please, my contact info should be available. Please reach out, and I look forward to speaking with you more soon.